you. Welcome back to Cindy's Library. I'm Cindy, and today I'm going to talk about the first item on my Ancient Sithon list. Beowulf, translation by Maria Dahvana Hadley. I hope I said that right. Anyway, I am afraid I have to DNF this one, which makes me really sad. But the reasons for it are very interesting. And so I'll talk some about this book, but I'm going to be talking more about the overall feel or the overall idea of translation. So I've read other translations of Beowulf before. Forget all of them, but I've read Tolkien and several others. And this one, well, it's interesting. It's a mix of both older concepts and newer concepts. Like the first word of Beowulf is famously what? But the translation starts this epic poem with bro. And the reasoning of the translator I can appreciate. She feels that the language should be updated to reflect a modern audience. She's going for guys at the bar and someone standing up and telling a story, something along those lines. And on those terms, bro definitely works. And I can see where she would get the idea that that was what she is going for. Because in many ways, say Hrothgar's Hall, the type of hall where this type of story would have been sung and told, is not unlike that. And I'm not without sympathy for this position as well on another level. And that level is I went on a mission for my church for a year and a half down in Brazil and learned to speak Portuguese. And it was interesting when we would have, say, mission conferences where all of the missionaries would get together with the mission president and things like that. A mix mostly of American and Brazilian people, and Portuguese was mostly spoken, unless it was strictly between some Americans. But in either case, the interesting thing was how English words would be dropped into the Portuguese, and Portuguese words would be dropped into the English, precisely because there was no direct translation of the concept they wanted to convey in the language that was primarily being spoken at the moment. And so, knowing that they would get the other language, or most of them would, they would drop words from the other languages to flesh out the meaning in a way that couldn't be done with just one language. Rather fascinating, and so I am not unsympathetic to this idea. And And yet, I just felt that it doesn't work. And that's just me. If you read this version, maybe you will disagree with me. But here is an example. Ecthos hair would have been filleted, recategorized as MIA, and left to rot in her cavern had not his suit saved him. That too was God's work. The Lord, maker of miracles, sky designer, had no trouble leveling the playing field when Beowulf beat the Count and stood. So, yeah, it's too much of a mix of the old and new somehow. Doesn't seem harmonious. And while on one level the inspiration of guys telling stories in a bar kind of fits on one level, I'm not an expert on Old English by any means. I've taken a class, but language is not my forte. Still have a long way to go to get really proficient at it. But I know enough about the background of Beowulf and of the language to say, for another reason, I'm not sure that this was the best choice. That is, a lot of the language used in the Beowulf poem was already what would have been considered archaic at the time it was written down. Now granted, if you go back farther to the oral tradition, that may not be the case. But still, a good parallel would be someone reading the King James Version of the Bible or Shakespeare in English today. It would be that level of difference. So between that and the way they just don't mixing up old and new like that just doesn't quite work for me. I am sad, but this translation just doesn't work for me. I can recommend Tolkien's as a fairly standard translation. Seamus Heaney's is more poetic, and they definitely match better as far as I am concerned. Tolkien made the argument too that language has to match the setting. Would it make sense to plop a knight into a medieval world and have him speaking like a New Yorker? It really wouldn't. And I'm not saying that some updating might not be appropriate, but she definitely leaned heavily on that side and just didn't work for me, I'm sad to say. It did make me think some about translation and what it means, and so I'm glad for that. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say about this translation of Beowulf. Thank you for stopping by Cindy's library. I truly appreciate it. Love to hear your thoughts if you have read the specific translation of Beowulf. Love to hear your thoughts on translation in general. What would you say is are the things that you look for in a good translation? So, anyway, this has been Cindy's Library. I hope we all stay safe and healthy. And as always, until next time, happy reading!